It's like he actually had me feel an emotion there. Hi, my name is Patrick. I'm an alcoholic. And it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys this morning. I did tell Harvey I'm going to try to stay linear. If you know me, I have the attention span of a gnat, and I have a communication style that's somewhat popcornish. So I'm going to try to do as I was taught here at Sunday Morning Live, tell what I was like, what happened, what I'm like now, be sober halfway through. And then make sure you don't make us late for brunch. And I'll start from the very beginning. A very good place to start, right? So I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My name is Patrick Sean McCleary. I'm Irish. We were not Catholic, though. Both of my parents were alcoholics, so we were not, going anywhere on Sunday morning. I'm going to talk about my family for just a moment, but I promise, for those who know me, I promise I'm going to just get in and get out, and I'm not going to turn it into an Al-Anon share. But my parents were good people. They met at LSU when they were freshmen. They became boyfriend and girlfriend, which I didn't even realize that until my dad died, and then I realized they were actually human beings. But they got married and they had 5 kids, and so the thing that I would say, and I really did want to prepare for this part because I don't want to linger here too much. But when I got sober in August of 2000 in Austin. And when I first got sober and I first worked the steps with my first sponsor, Steve W. in Austin, I worked the steps, and then there was and I don't want to call it a pink cloud, but there was a lot of healing, and there was a lot of, if they would have known better, they would have done better, and all that kind of stuff, and all that's true, right? And the other thing about my parents is that which I've seen kind of a pattern, is that my dad was, yes, he was an alcoholic, but he was also perfect in our eyes. I really lucked out in the dad department. I mean, I don't have daddy issues. I have subscriptions on other issues, but I don't have, on other stuff. But my dad was like, the big thing was realizing that he wasn't perfect. So he was, in all of our eyes, he was, and then my mother was the villain, right? And so, but while both of them were alcoholics, there was a certain amount of mental illness with my mom, and so anyway, my point is that when I first worked the steps and I got the recovery, and there was a certain amount of healing, but over the last 20 years, a lot more has unfolded. And it's been more like more will be revealed, and it's been primarily through my siblings, right? And I promised you guys I'm not going to get into our sister program, but so, and then I'll kind of end this and then get back to me, is that what I know today is that alcoholism, addiction, and mental illness, these are the gifts that keep on giving, right? And it's kind of a melodrama, it's like a never-ending story, but there is, what I have found too is that, for me, I got sober and then I started going down this recovery sobriety path, which led me in a whole different direction, but it's still my family, so I still have responsibilities to kind of deal with that. But anyway, like I said, back to me. I was a neurotic child. As Bruce says, I was as neurotic as an inbred poodle. I was nervous. I had a very nervous disposition. I was clenched all the time. It was, things were going pretty good until I was about 4 and I got sent to preschool. And I'm gay, by the way. Helen Keller, hello, Helen Keller. I know, and I'm from Louisiana, like I said. So I learned early on that I was going to need to butch it up if I was going to continue breathing in Baton Rouge. And so I was definitely the very typical. Best little boy in the world at school, teacher's pet, and tried to, do everything to kind of validate. I mean, at home, I was kind of wrote a pin mark, the bad seed, but at school, I was, the best, straight A, that kind of person, until I realized that nobody cared. That was later, I needed a drink long before I had one. I was 14 the first time I had a drink. It was it was my first week in high school. I found myself at a keg party. That was in 1982, August. Yeah, and I got wasted, and it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. I was rocketed to a fourth dimension, and it was great. I mean, it was really the most fun I had ever had, I think, up until that point. And I drank between 14 and I got sober 18 years later at the age of 32. And I'm not going to bore you guys with, I'll tell you some of it to make sure you know that I'm qualified to be up here. But it definitely was, I loved the effect produced by alcohol, and where I'm from, it was not that, not that Louisiana's that special or South Louisiana's that special, but it's just like very much like drinking was just part of the culture. You drank, you threw up, and you started drinking it. I mean, it's just very much like this is not an after school special, right? Everybody drank excessively. Everybody is very much about partying, and LSU is right there, so I started sneaking into bars, when I was 16, which I'm very grateful for because I really sowed my wild oats early. So by the time I got here, it was all oatmeal, so I didn't have to have any, I had done all that, right? And so I graduated from high school and went to LSU and spent the next 6 years getting my undergraduate in general studies, which is also what we did at LSU. I started out kind of, this was in the 80s, mid 80s at this point, and it was, I kind of started out at the kind of the punky kind of new age wavy club called Xanthus, and then I graduated to the gay bar called Neiman's across the street. Through those years, it was very much, when I look back, and not that we were that special, but it was definitely very much, it was fun. It was really a lot of fun, and there was had a lot of great friends, and had a lot of fun. I will say, in the context of all this, is that, I love to drink. I mean, I didn't have hobbies. My hobby was getting effed up, right? And going out, let's go out, and it was also, very much about, through those years, it was very much about like keeping the party going, and so it was very much like the oonce and all that, everything that entails, and it was fun, I know that during that period is when I became, when do you become a pickle, right? When do you go? And it was definitely, I definitely look back and look where it was like it wasn't. Again, I was not a casual drinker ever, but I also remember that I was very much needed a drink. I eventually started working at the Residence Inn by Marriott. Sorry, I don't know if I should, keep that to yourselves, but I just remember needing a drink, needing a cigarette, needing a drink, and because work is hard, and it's really aggravating having to check in aggravating people to their hotel room, and so, by the way, I was Employee of the Year in 1991 at the Residence Inn by Marriott in Baton Rouge. But again, eventually I graduated. I took my show on the road. I did a South by Southwest Geographical Cure tour. I moved to Austin just because, and no reason. Loaded a U-Haul, moved to Austin, lived there for about a year and a half. Moved back to Baton Rouge, and it's one of those things where it's like, I went back to the poison well. It's just kind of like you leave, and then my experience was I left like Mama Cass, like I'm never coming back here. I'll be happy any place but here, and then, 18 months later, it's just like I struggled with the concept of rent. In Austin, which I love Austin, I lived there twice, by the way. Obviously, well, yeah. So I lived in Austin twice. I'm a Dallas person who likes to visit Austin, right? But even share, like it was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. I mean, but anyway, so I moved back to Baton Rouge for a couple of years, and again, just my drinking kind of continued. But during this phase, at this point, I'm kind of in my mid-20s. I started to experiment with not drinking, and I noticed that I actually felt better when I didn't drink, and then I wanted to get drunk, and so and that was also the first time visited or audited AA. It was. I'll tell this story real quick. When I was at LSU, I became friends with this young lady named Samantha. And Samantha was like a fallen sorority girl who found her way. She kind of crash landed at Neiman's at the gay bar, and she was a total disaster. And we became fast friends. And at one point, I just remember, this was back in the old timey days where you had like answering machines, and and I remember waking up on a Sunday morning, and there was like, I don't know, 10 messages on my answering. But even back then, for those people who know me, you can call me anytime. Just if you need me, call me, and I will get back to you. But anyway, I woke up to these like 10 messages, and she had fallen asleep in her car at a stop sign on LSU. So she had gotten arrested for a DWI at LSU with the LSU police. And she was really drunk when she first started, the first few messages. And then as the night wore on, she became more and more sober. But my point is that, and again, if anyone's ever spent any time in Louisiana, we're firm believers in nepotism and, all that stuff. So I had helped Samantha get a job at my father's law firm. So she was like the, receptionist there. And I didn't even mention this, but my dad had gotten sober in 1977. So my dad was a sober member of AA. And so my dad actually helped Samantha get sober. And so she kind of disappeared from the bar scene. And I do remember her. Actually coming, or her and I having a conversation at work, which is strange to me. She actually came up to the hotel while I was working, and she was really mad. She was like, "Well, you're an alcoholic too. Like, why?" I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't get caught." Really good friends. I'm a really good friend, and she just kind of disappeared after that. But then later, so that was like in the early 90s. So when I came back to Baton Rouge, like 94, I guess, she was a person that I called, and I went to my first AA meeting for me with her. And I never, I don't want to ever forget that. Actually, Kathleen and I went to a documentary like years ago. She was actually in this documentary about sobriety, which was interesting. But anyway, so that was my first kind of visit, and it was great. I really liked AA. I didn't like the not drinking part, but I liked AA. I had no objection. I didn't find really any of it objectionable except the main part. And so I just kind of trudged along, and then ultimately I moved to Dallas. That was my first time to move to Dallas for my job. And at that point I'm working at a bank. I went from hotels to I clawed my way to a customer service position at a bank. And so anyway, my drinking, that period was my first time in Dallas. My drinking kind of continued, got worse, just as it does, just got worse and worse and worse. And then nothing too exciting other than the fact that, I did ultimately, through a series of events, my drinking that was really probably the worst of my actual drinking. And this was like in the late 90s here in Dallas. And a friend of mine, I remember waking up on one Sunday, and a friend of mine, called me and said he had a particularly bad Saturday at a pool party at the Thunderbird over there somewhere, and I had been there, but I had crashed at 5 or whatever, and so. And he called me and said, "Okay, I'm going to an AA meeting, and I'm taking you with me." So we went to an AA meeting, and that was my second time to audit AA, and it was at Lambda on 2727 Oakland. I don't remember much. It's all very fuzzy to me. I remember we left that meeting, though. I remember people were really, really uncomfortably nice, and I remember he had a date. He left his first meeting and he had a date with somebody, and so anyway, I hung around for a little bit. Again, didn't stay sober, and then work led me to Austin. So I moved to Austin, and this was like the end of '98. And by the way, at that point, it's like I lived in Austin, like I said, the first time. At this point, I'm like older. I mean, I haven't lived in Austin like in like 20 years, actually. It's been 20 years since I actually left. But Austin, in my experience, it skews very young. Okay. And so, the first time, young, cute enough, the second time it's like I was well past my expiration date. It was not as, it was not as fun and exciting, and probably also because my drinking had devolved, so it was much more. The ounce days were over. It was like, vodka and Valium and unscheduled naps. It was not. It was not a lot of, not a lot of excitement. And that was really it. That's the last 2 years of my drinking. I do not have. I see my friend Keith over there. I do not have an exciting end to my drinking story. I mean, there was no fire trucks. There was no trips to Bangkok. It was very kind of sad and pathetic. Boxes of wine and cartons of cigarettes, that kind of thing. And it was, but when I think about it though, I think about the fact that it was, when I think about step one, I think about how I felt, like, because I try to make sure, because the other times, by the way, like I did the whole dance of, I kind of talk my, I could kind of debate my way out of, taking direction, right? And I'm very grateful for this, that at the end of my drinking, the way I felt, I was 32 years old. I was utterly disappointed in the way my life had turned out. Like there was some horrible mistake. Like this is not the way it was supposed to be. I was filled with self-hatred, self-loathing. Just, it was very much, as the book says, that led me to be as willing as only the dying can be, right? And I was willing to ask for help, and I kind of navigated through that. One thing that I often forget, because I'm not delusional, I don't think, but I do have a real kind of Vicky, Nikki, Jessica, Tessica thing going on, and so sometimes I forget that I was sneaking into AA meetings for like months before I got sober. And if you've ever spent time in Austin, like Northland, which was a great meeting to sneak in and out of, because trust me, you're not speaking unless they want to hear from you. There's no like, let the spirit move you. So it was fairly easy to get in and out of there. And I lived right by there at that point. But my point is that those last few months, maybe that last year, that last, 8 months, it was very much that kind of, I think for me, I think about it like every day I would wake up determined not to do something, and every day I would do that very thing. And that's my definition of like, the four horsemen and just that kind of absolute degradation. And so anyway, I kind of navigated my way and asked for help, and ultimately, through my employer, did the whole kind of whatever, and my current employer has the same thing. I did kind of navigate through that, like, through a therapist who then led me to this and that. And then it was like I ended up in this IOP thing at this hospital. And it was like, and I tell this part of my story just because I went in on a Thursday night to do that admission stuff, which takes an astoundingly long time. I still remember that, almost 22 years later. And the lady asked me, she said, do you want to start tomorrow on Friday, or do you want to just wait till Monday? And I just had this moment of clarity that was like came from nowhere and said, you need to go. Like, if you don't do it now, it was like this little parting of the clouds. Like, you have to do this now, because if you wait at all, it's not going to happen. So I started the next day, that Friday night. I went to work that day. Back then we did go into work on Fridays, or at all. And I went to work and went home, and I was a little nervous, so I took a Valium. And so that was my first night in treatment, or whatever, it's IOP. And that was August 25th of 2000. And so the next day's my sobriety date, August 26th, 2000. So now I am, if Jack is up up or wherever he is listening. It's 11:55. So now I'm sober, and that was. And it was, that those months leading up to that day, it was like Groundhog Day. It was like every day was the same. Like you just wake up and every day was the same. And then when I first got sober, especially those first 30 days, it was Groundhog Day part 2, because it was like then it became every day was the same, which I definitely appreciate, because it was all about structure and routine. And just very much like I was so scared that I was going to drink that it was basically, and those first 30 days were very much like on the weekdays it was, work, go to the IOP, and they can come home. On the weekends I would probably go to at least 2 meetings on the weekends, and so it was all about routine, structure, that type of thing. At the end of that, one thing I'll just say, just because it popped in my mind, one thing I really realized that I still remember in those in that period was in my first 30 days I started to feel better. The more sober I became, I was feeling better. Where I was with other people who, with every passing day, they were feeling worse. Which for me, which I'm very grateful for, because what that meant was that wasn't suffering from like clinical depression and things like that. But my real point that I'm trying to make is I also really realized that let me put it to you this way. I'm going to put it in an unfiltered way. For me, it's like I was there because I wanted to be there, and I wanted to be sober. It was real. I had to be really clear, because it was very real. If you've ever been in those situations, that different people have different reasons to be in, whether it's here or in those places, if that makes sense. So it's just like, so I had to be really clear that I want to be sober. I want to be here. I'm choosing to be here. I'm not like here because I'm trying to avoid this, that, or the other, if that makes sense. And again, that was just for me. Like I just had to be really clear about that. So at the end of the 30 days, the guy who ran the place, I also quit smoking when I got sober, which I do not recommend at all. And but the guy who the people who ran the place, basically they told it we had to have a sponsor before we graduated, and they told us that if we didn't get a sponsor, then our insurance wasn't going to pay for the whole thing. Now I know that was a lie, but I was like, of course I waited to the very last minute, right, and got a sponsor, and that was at Land to Live and Let Live in Austin. And anyway, so I just, I got a sponsor. He was he worked, he was a corporate trainer for like a fast food place. My point is that it was kind of sponsorship by soundbite. It was not like, it was not like this kumbaya. It was just perfect for me, because I didn't want to, the very idea of calling somebody, and again, back then, this was before we had texting and all that stuff. So he was the perfect sponsor for me at the time. It was very much like very clear direction, very basic, simple direction, and in the steps. And he was very clear to me that I had to pay attention, because it was like train the trainer. I had to learn this because I was going to have to train other people on how to work the steps, which resonated with me. Okay, so got it. And we started doing the deal. And he, one thing I realized that we did was 10, 11, and 12, we kind of started from the very beginning, which is very basic stuff. And I also read 5 pages a day out of the big book, which was manageable. It was just the first 164 pages. It was very much just like very simple, basic kind of stuff. Kind of the first week or so after I so it was my first, like, I don't know, month and a half or something. I think it was a Friday night, I'm pretty sure. And it was after the 8:00 meeting, and he said, I thought he asked me if I wanted to go to dinner with these guys. And then I said something like, no, thank you, I've already had dinner. It was like 9:00. And then I realized that he had indeed not asked me if I wanted to go anywhere. He just told me that I was going to go with these people. And while he was going to go home because it was 9:00. But anyway, So anyway, I found myself with this group of guys at this place called Denny's, and on Burnett Road, and in Austin, which now it's like leveled; it's not there anymore. But anyway, and that started kind of my fellowship journey in AA. And I literally, because I moved away from Austin maybe like 18 months later, it's like I spent probably almost every night at Denny's, for the next 18 months. And with that group of guys, several of whom are still alive and I know and friends with. And so anyway, I worked the steps with my sponsor. I kind of alluded to that at the beginning, kind of rebuilt my life. And I, Harvey kind of alluded to this, but I will just share that I fell in love with AA too, because I'm very grateful the way I entered AA, because I did not enter AA like on a high note. I don't know really anybody who does, but I, and again, I love to steal lines from other people, but it's like I had nowhere to go but up and nowhere to go but meetings. And so I went to meetings every day, and I also love AA because I have always loved, I say this, like I've always been a huge fan of John Waters and John Waters movies. And I always wanted to live in a John Waters movie. So I naturally loved, the characters in AA. And Austin has just as many characters as we have here. And so I really fell in love with AA, and I fell in love with the fellowship. And the reason why I mention that is because I consider myself very, very lucky because I've seen it with other people. Like I was never like sitting here looking out the window wishing I was somewhere else. I was never like I'm supposed to be at a party at the Hoo Ha Hut, right? Do you know what I mean? I was never like I was happy to actually be there, and it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And I also started making friends, and in my experience in fellowship, especially when I was a newcomer, it was just a lot of fun, and it was like you're a kid again, right? And it's just like you're just running around like running buddies, and just doing stuff. And I remember laughing. I hadn't laughed in a long time, and just and Austin was restarting their roundup, which had been dormant for several years. So I'm a big believer in you have direct service and you have indirect service, and you have just, the point is, for me, I have found that stuff, whether it's, and my first sponsor is very clear on like, this service work is not optional. It is like a cafeteria plan. You have to figure out what what works for you so that you're not useless. But but you have to do something. But for him, the primary form of service is passing it on. So you have to. But there's also all different kinds of service work. So my point in bringing that up is that I personally have found great benefit from being involved in things like roundups and stuff like that. That is like, yes, it's not directly AA, but it also just the centrifugal force of just the number of people that I've met and the commitments and just showing up and doing what you said you were going to do, that kind of stuff. So anyway, so just moving on, after a little bit of time there, by the way, when I lived in Austin, I felt like I was on Gilligan's Island. Like I did not want to be there. I did not want to leave Dallas. So I left Dallas kind of begrudgingly. So if you've ever lived somewhere where you didn't want to be, or if you've ever left a city that you didn't want to leave, it kind of sucks, right? And so and every time, again, when I say Gilligan's Island, it's like every time I thought I was going to get out, then it didn't happen. And ultimately I got paroled about 18 months, and I got, through my job, I got to move to Wilmington, Delaware, which is near everywhere you want to be, right? And so I spent a couple years up there, which is great, and got a sponsor who, and again, it's the magic of AA, right? I got a sponsor there named Jay, who had gotten sober in Dallas actually, and had lived in Austin. And I learned a lot about I think it's the sixth tradition, about like how, because I had gotten sober in Austin, so I go to a new place and it's like they're all doing it wrong and it's just like crazy and stuff. And so I had learned from people who had moved. I mean, I learned a lot, right, about how that it's not wrong. It's just, it's just that's part of the traditions, right? The one thing I will say, just because being in this room and thinking about it and thinking about this, is that that's where the first time I met Mark Carroll. He was friends with Jay, and I met him. He was there visiting, and met him, went to a meeting, went to a diner, and then, immediately fell in love with Mark, and we became fast friends. And he, anyway, just so strange what my experience over the last 21 years. It's like whatever the term is, golden circles, or it's just the coincidences and the relationships that have formed. Is that odd or is that God, right? But that's when I first met Mark. And spent a little bit of time in Philadelphia, but then I got a call to move back to Dallas, which was the call I'd been waiting for like 5 years. And so I moved back here in right around June 2004. So it's been almost 18 years since I moved back to Dallas. I was worried, is it going to be everything that I want? Because I remember I loved Dallas, didn't want to leave. I had not ever been sober here. And so I moved back, and it was everything that I had hoped it would be. I felt immediately this is my adopted home, and I was very welcomed, by people like Mark and others, and just kept on my journey. I just maybe tell a couple little things again because of where we are, and kind of I want to actually acknowledge and show respect for. My experience in Dallas recovery is that that I love Dallas. I love especially the way our recovery community, just because of the relationships that we have, how diverse it is, and how and I remember being welcomed specifically. Bruce was very welcoming. Mark was very welcoming. Jim M. Here at Sunday Morning Live, this became an appointment meeting for me, like right out of the gate. This is where I met Darren, and really so many people. It's too many to count, actually. I don't know how long it was after I moved here, but I remember Jim was having a birthday party or something, and there was this guy there who was visiting from Hoboken. And if anyone has ever seen the film Muriel's Wedding, and it was like I was like Muriel's sister. I was sitting next to this guy. I was like, oh my God, you're terrible. And his name is John Politis. And anyway, he. If you've ever become friends with somebody, it's just like immediately, it's like you've known each other your whole life, and so. There was never any doubt being here in Dallas, like I was where I was supposed to be, and with my people, and so we just started the journey. Again, I got a different, I was always taught, because I did have the opportunity to move several times in sobriety. I was taught pretty early on to get back immediately in, because it would be real easy to not and to kind of isolate, And so that definitely, I did 90 meetings in 90 days pretty much every time I moved. And so I got a sponsor, did the steps, again with that sponsor. I, was just walking down, I guess I moved here when I was almost 4 years sober. When I hit 5 years sober, I did have, I don't want to call it a nervous breakdown, but it was kind of like at that point how old was I? I guess I was 37, and it was one of those things where I'm very grateful for today. It was very uncomfortable at the time, but it was like I was very unhappy, and I was very the way I would describe it is just like I was very kind of bitter, sarcastic. Things were not going the way that I wanted them to be. I was not the person I wanted to be. Things were not going the way it's like people, places, and things, right? And so, and again, I'm going to tread lightly here because this is AA. But that led me back to the steps, but in a different kind of way. And specifically, like in my experience, what I came to kind of learn that worked for me is that when I, and it goes to, it's just as true today as it was at the very beginning, but I, if I'm not sober, I have nothing, right? So when I'm in the beginning, it was really about how do I get through the day not drinking and not using, right? And not doing things that, that are going to destroy me. So it's kind of like suicide prevention, right? And then 5 years later, it was more about homicide prevention, and so, and it became more about just not being miserable, right? And I learned about just the illusion of control, or what it really was, quite frankly, coming back to the steps. Is I had done the steps, and the first time I had done the steps, and I had done, I'm from Louisiana, so I do believe in voodoo and voodoo. So it's just okay, so you do your inventory, you do your fifth step, you go home for an hour, you say the prayer, okay, got it. I've now done 6 and 7. And so 6 and 7 were definitely more will be revealed. Okay. And so when I talk about this period, it was that's when the 6 and 7, now I started to understand things that I had not understood before, right? And so, some specific examples were, I couldn't have told you what pride was before going through that experience. And pride being basically thinking that in my mind, I have this belief that I'm supposed to be these things, right? And it's supposed to be my movie, right? And it's supposed to be I'm supposed to be a billionaire, I'm supposed to be a genius, I'm supposed to be a porn star, I'm supposed to be, this stuff. And there are gaps, right? That's not, that's not the way things turned out, right? And then the bitterness can be and I think I heard this in this room. It's I don't want a Mercedes, I want your Mercedes, And Dallas can be a rough town when you're comparing yourself to other people, But here's the good news. I mean, there's a solution for that. Is go back to the steps. This has been my experience, to go back to the steps and really work the steps again, and understand. And while the big book obviously is where the directions are for working the steps, 6 and 7 is like a paragraph, right? The essays on the steps and the 12 and 12, I think the essays around 6 and 7, I think, are amazing, because that's where I really find, that's how, for me, it's that's how I really understand the way it's expressed. I think about character defects as fear is fear is always the root, right? And then it manifests through the 7 deadly sins. I'm not religious. 7 deadly sins means nothing to me in any religious context, just the way that they're explained, like anger, envy, pride, all that stuff, it just resonates. So anyway, and I did find that very helpful, and I started to go and do a specific practice, same steps, and just working through that. Learned very basic things like, control is just an illusion. I can influence, right? But this idea that I have control over anything, and that's an illusion, right? And I hate to mention, sorry, Kathleen, I'm going to mention you again, but I remember Kathleen saying in a meeting once, I decided to let it rain today. It's okay, it's just easier just to not do that, right? And let things unfold organically. So anyway, just to kind of fast forward and kind of come, and now I'm circling to land the plane, things generally, trudged along, and again, continue to work the steps, try to be of service. I did have an opportunity about a little bit over 5 years ago to, through my job, I've had the same employer since I moved to Dallas in 2004. Had the opportunity to move to New York, and on one hand, it was again, I was moving to New York when you're 49. But there, there's the Stevie Nicks gypsy in me that's just like, I can't say no to that, right? And so I did, and it really was a great experience. It was not like this, rocket to stardom kind of thing, but it was. I was there for 3 years. It was great 3 years. The best part was AA. The best part was recovery and the relationships, and it's very, very different up there. But I had, a really great time and learned a lot. But I also knew that. After when I moved up there, I had to be there for my job. But after 3 years, everything had changed, and then everything really, really changed. But everything had changed where you didn't have to live there; you could live wherever. And so I knew after 3 years that I was gonna. But at that point, I could live anywhere I wanted. So I decided I was going to move back home to my adopted home here, and I'd already started that process. And then the pandemic hit, like literally. I had to move date up just 2 weeks, but it was literally, I felt like the gates were clanging as the plane was taking off. And so I came back here, and I love New York. I'm going to go, I have just like everywhere I've lived, I have great friends there. And I came back 2 years ago and have been just like all of us, having this experience. I will share that one of the things that has been my experience over the last 2 years is that I feel great today, right now, emotionally, mental health wise, but I definitely went through a period where I really, really struggled with mental health issues like anxiety and depression that I had never struggled with before. I had never had that experience. I will say that one of the things I kind of attribute that to is that when I got sober, like whatever I thought sobriety was going to look like, it was basically from the day that I got sober, I've been busy. It's just like there's never been really a time where I didn't have somewhere to be or somewhere to do or something to, And so it was just like the pure right or wrong, the pure activity, the pure just energy of just constantly moving, and just kind of, I guess, kept all of that. Those dragons at bay, right? And then when everything kind of stopped, a lot of stuff and through coming through different doors started to come up, and that that gave the opportunity to kind of through the steps again kind of work on that stuff, and the main thing I would say is just and I hate to be so cheesy, but when you're in hell, keep going, just keep going, and also ask for help, right? Things got so bad I called my sponsor, she's in Austin, and she was like, and she very much kind of guided me directly. I was literally like, because I got to this point where I had insomnia so bad that I wasn't sleeping like at all. And it was literally like, do you just go and check yourself into a nut hut? I don't know how this works, right? Do you just go to a hospital? What do you do? But navigated through that, walked through that. And again, through the help and the guardrails that we have here, that I can say that just got through it, and now it's just kind of a memory. And then I'll end with what it's like today is I'm 53, about to be 54. I will say, without getting into detail, I definitely. As I saw something on social media that said, okay, enjoy your 30s and 40s because at 50 the check engine light comes on, and it's like, okay, that has been my experience, and I've been very lucky because I've enjoyed actually great health my whole life. So I get I get very upset when I have a cold, right? I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And so anyway, but it's just part of life. It's just part of, and it's part of just like, okay, you have to think about this stuff. I was telling, Chris and John, that it's just like, one thing I do know that there's a lot of, and this is just not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, and this is about AA. My experience in AA, this is my belief, which is my opinion, is that there's a lot of problems that I don't have because I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And there's just a whole laundry list, and it's the kind of the same thing, like physically. There's a whole lot of problems that I don't have just because of the way I live my life as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Sleeping. Doing yoga, stuff like that. And so I attribute that to just, this program and the way we live our life. And then the other stuff is just like, just like a lot of people, and I think most people, at this point, it's become about, you say that, again, kind of a cheesy saying, but it's like romances, finances, and family, right? It's like, it always like, why do they rob a bank? So that's where the money is, right? It's like, so with family, it's just like, that's always comes back to that. And at this point, it's really about, for me, it's about what are my responsibilities. It's about elder care, not only for my mother, but my sister's disabled. She's in a nursing home. It's about navigating through how do you be the adult in the room? How do I make sure that I focus on the recovery? Because I don't want to be bitter and angry. I don't want to have, I don't want to kind of live in that, like, here's this crazy list of stuff that, I don't want to curse, but it's just like this long list of bullshit and bad behavior. Like, because in sobriety, it's not always like sunshine and lollipops, right? It's sometimes you're reacting to other people's stuff. And so, but all that being said, it's like, I want to live in a sense where I am a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm practicing these principles in all our affairs. And the reality of it, I want to cooperate with the universe. But I also want to make sure that I'm being clear on who am I, who do I want to be, and what does that look like as an employee, as a friend, as a son, as a brother, as an uncle, all that type of stuff. So that's that's where I am today. It's things are good, and I'll end with this. It's like, I'm very aware, I'm very grateful that I know today that every good thing in my life today is because I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So thank you for having me, Harvey. Thank you for asking me, and everybody have a good brunch.